Hey guys, we're going to get started.
Yeah.
I have to admit, I'm ecstatic about the turnout. We have 210 RSVPs as of like 8:30 a.m. And then, of course, everyone drops off, but that's okay. I'm Sean Murphy. I am one of a team of people who helped to organize this event. This is obviously part of Data Innovation DC, a meetup focused on discussing creating value, whether it's social, environmental, financial, creating value from data. And very excited about the event tonight. First, I want to introduce the team. Sarah is out of town. Josh is busy slaving away on his own startup, which has been funded. And Rob, all the way down from New York City, is in the back, co-founder and co-organizer. And then Andrea in the back is going to join our team soon. So we'll have 5 people, and it takes a ton of effort to put these things on. I'm very excited about it. Cooley, where's Eric? Right there. Cooley is an amazing law firm. They're very, 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 very good for startups, for tech startups. And I can speak it through experience because they helped me with my startup about 5 years ago. Fantastic. I cannot recommend them enough. I shopped around the entire city. I interviewed all the major firms, and I went with them. They rock. And they also provide the space. So, Intridia is one of, so Data Innovation DC is part of Data Community DC, which is an umbrella mafia-like group that helps to orchestrate some of the meetups that are oriented around data. Harlan Harris is our president, our fearless president, and there are some board members floating around here as well, myself included and Rob. And Intridia has been so generous, and they've sponsored all of our meetups, and they've done wonderful things like help supply you with the pizza from Flippin' Pizza. And I can't say enough, they are a software engineering rockstar house, so if you need something built, I know they're Rails specialists, but they do a lot of other languages as well. They're pretty phenomenal. CEO is a very nice guy as well. I left this one in from last time. Sensio sponsored us last time, but wanted to give them a little more love. I know they're hiring, so if you reach out to them and you're interested in data, I'm sure they will talk to you. Sageboard is a startup that's happening in DC that's taking subject matter experts like yourself, allowing you to declare things that you wouldn't mind tutoring, and then trying to connect you to students who want tutoring in those subjects. So it's a local effort, it's underway, and I know it's working, and people are being connected, and people are tutoring. So if you're interested in doing that, please talk to Tony about it. Hit the website, drop him an email. And then I'm running the Data Community DC website, and we are looking for content. We like to think of the blog as sort of a pedestal by which practitioners in the area can broadcast their awesomeness to the rest of the world. Because I'm really tired of reading about all this crap and TechCrunch about like a San Francisco company, when I know the people here are just as smart, if not smarter, and we've been here for years, but no one ever talks about anything we do. So part of the reason for the site is to provide a forum for people to discuss. Talk about the projects you're working on, talk about new open source projects, new data-related products, or whatever. Please hit me up. Say hi to Sean at Gmail is the guy, me, that you want to email. We'd love to have your contributions. Okay? And then, just to give you a little sense of the group, we've grown. We're almost at 1,000 members, which I'm very happy. I'm not sure how Meetup computes the active members, so I'm going to poo-poo that number because it's lower. But I also like to think that we have such diverse talks and conversations that we attract kind of a new audience every month. And so we get some people showing up. Who here has been before? Show of hands. Who here is completely new? Oh, that's sweet. Hopefully you guys come back once in a while. And then last but not least, after we do this event, we go and we have drinks. We get happy hour specials right around the corner. The only caveat is you have to wear your amazingly cool name tag to the bar. And this is what gets you the happy hour special. It's a good time. It's a great way to meet and mingle and really get to know someone. Now, this event was being co-sponsored by Statistical Programming DC. Abhijit, where are you? Right here in front of me. And I'm going to throw up some slides.
The background looks a lot better. You just go to present. Move it over to the other screen or something. There you go.
Okay.
You're not there.
Okay, Phil.
No, you're in two screens. So you can click on it. Go. And now you get to where it is. Yeah, I think so. Amazing for us. So, as Sean said, Data Community DC is an umbrella organization, and so this is one meetup. There's 4 other meetups, and I happen to be one of them. Statistical Programming DC, if you think of it as the how-to meetup, if you will. All the other meetups are talking about why and what's going on, and we talk about sort of the programming aspects, how to do it. There's tutorials, there's talks about introductory talks, advanced level talks, all sorts. And so we meet in the DuPont area. Typically, we don't usually come all the way to Cooley. We don't have as cool digs. Sean has all the connections. But we usually meet somewhere in the DuPont area once a month. We used to be our users group. So, and then we realized we saw the light that none of us all of us are polyglots, right? None of us uses one tool to do everything. And so we've opened it up. We've had Python talks. We've had Julia talks. We've had our talks. We're waiting for the SAS talks if someone wants to do it. I'm not, or MATLAB or whatever. I mean, whatever tool you're using, we'd love to hear about it as long as it's about data analysis and data munging and not necessarily databases. We'd love to have someone talk about Hadoop and how you do data analysis with it. Pretty soon there will be a link on our website, which is part of the Data Community DC site, talking about sort of topics we want to cover next year. So if anyone wants to talk about stuff that they're doing, either beginner level, intermediate level, advanced level, or have suggestions about things they want to hear about, please find me or actually any of the meetup organizers here. And I just want to reiterate something that I think Sean has said either today or in the past, but the meetups are about you. It's about you guys driving the content, driving what's going on. So it has to be dialogue. It's not just the organizing team for DIDC and the organizing team for SPDC and the organizing team for Data Community DC. It's all of us trying to figure this out. And I'm just going to basically, I'm going to just go through all of that because I don't need to talk about it, except I want the previous one. We've been around for 3 years, so we're a little bigger than this meetup. But they're catching up really fast. So he's not gonna, we have, sort of like the races at the baseball game, right? So we'll have to figure out who wins eventually. The winner right now is Harlan, is DSDC. He's got over 3,000. I'm about 1,500, and there's, you guys in visualization are about 1,000. So quick catch up here. Mark Weissman is my partner in crime in this. Both of us are probably most available on Twitter as well as on the email. Mark can't be here today simply because he is on the other coast because of a job. So flying in from Vancouver for the meetup is a little hard. So I see a lot of familiar faces who are here from Statistical Programming DC. Thanks for coming. Thanks for supporting DIDC. For those of you in DIDC who want to know about how to do some of the stuff you'll learn about, please come to SPDC and learn. keep a tab on the Data Community DC website for all the events, and let's get moving.
Yeah. So thank you so much. Let's see if I can. Yes?
Yes, got it.
Okay, so before we get started, this is a new type of event. Okay, so what we've done is we've gone to Census Bureau, we've begged them to come, and they've sent, how many experts you guys bring? Four. Four, so we got 4 experts.
5 people.
5 people. We'll let that person not self-identify. But they're here, and why they're here is to talk a little bit about what they do, but more importantly, what they have. And they have a ton of data, and they want you to use that data. And more importantly for this event, I didn't want people up here for 2 hours just yakking, right? It's supposed to be interactive, which means if you guys sit there and play with your phones, the event will suck. Okay? So ask questions, feel free, raise your hand, they'll actually answer them, they'll do their best job, and the more interactive it is, the better the event will be. So this isn't a college lecture, it's more law school, it won't quite be Socratic, although maybe that'd be more fun. So please, please, please engage the speakers, okay? It's the whole point of this. And I'm going to throw their slides up. And I'm going to invite Mike up. So please welcome
All right, thanks, Sean. Thanks, everybody, for turning out. I'm Mike Ratcliffe from Census Bureau. I have to say the last meetup that I spoke at was at the GODC meetup at Stetson's on the top floor, and I got to present with something other than water in my hand, but this is a much better space. And you can imagine about this many people crammed into that tiny room. We've got some slides. Because we felt like we had to have some slides to put some stuff up here, because we didn't want to cover everything just by talking at you. But we're going to go through them fairly quickly. What we're going to do first is kind of give you the 100,000-foot view on census data sets. So again, this is not to cover every single aspect of the data that we have, at least right now. What I want you to do is start asking questions of us, because we don't know what you're interested in. We can only, so we're not going to try to guess at all the myriad topics you might want to talk about. So I'll go through those slides, first few slides. Then I'm going to have my colleague Logan Powell come up. He's going to talk through some use cases. So what different people are doing, different groups are doing with our data to kind of start getting some ideas gelling. Then we'll do who's here, some introductions, tell you who the experts are and what our expertise is, or at least that we claim to be experts in, and give you an idea of kind of the range of topics that we have covered here. And it is a pretty broad range that we've got covered. And then it's open floor, and we really want to make sure that that's the bulk of the time, because we want to start talking. And that's how we learn what people are looking for, how they might want to try using our data, is through talking with you about your questions, what you're trying to do. So I'm in the geography division. I didn't put these slides in this order. I would have put geography first rather than people, because people doesn't, the demographic and the statistical data that has no context without the geography, but otherwise it's just a bunch of numbers. But this is a laundry list of all of the different kinds of data that we have about people in the country. And in the US, Puerto Rico, the outlying territories of Guam, American Samoa, Virgin Islands, and Northern Mariana. So we've got a lot of data about the population and all aspects of the population. And business, we got businesses up there? Not yet. And businesses. So what a lot of people don't realize at census is that we have an entire economic side of the house. So most people think of the census, the population census, the American Community Survey, so the demographic data. But we've got a lot of statisticians and economists churning out economic statistics, economic census, economic indicators. When you hear the monthly unemployment rates and a variety of other economic data that Wall Street lives and dies by, a lot of that's coming out of the Census Bureau. So we've got a ton of data there. Geographic information. We built the nation's first geographic database, the Tiger database. We've got a wealth of geospatial data. We are the de facto mapping agency for the U.S. Geological Survey is the official mapping agency, but we produce a whole lot more maps and a whole lot more spatial data than they do. And I'll turn it over to Logan.
Okay, Mike. So Mike kind of gave us a 100,000-foot view of some of the data sets. I hope you're looking at the slides, but you're not supposed to memorize them. That's not what we're really here for. You can go to the census.gov website to kind of see those exact same things. If you just navigate through the top tabs, you'll see them there. But we cover subjects from industries, businesses, and households, and a range of topics, anything from like income and poverty, health insurance, all the way up to like accessibility, handicap. These kinds of issues, the gamut is broad and deep. And when we were talking about this kind of problem that we have in describing our data in ways that make it useful to people to and make it something that people can use, Sean and us we were speaking with Sean about how do we present this in a manner that could be more sort of tactical and more interactive and more sort of creative. And he came up with the idea of presenting some use cases, and I think that's a really good way to crystallize how our data can be used. Now, these of course are just some examples, and we try to provide a variety of them, but this is by no means like a complete set of what you could potentially do with our data. But we did want to give you a sense of how it's currently being used, and we've also brought along a special guest that I'll introduce shortly from the Sunlight Labs, who do incredible things with transparency with our data. That having been said, so I did have these are actually videos, but we don't have a speaker, so I'm just going to talk to them. This is the chief demographer for Greater New Orleans, and they basically use census data to figure out vulnerability. Well, where areas of high vulnerability, like maybe high density, elderly, those kinds of people, and tend to be like more handicapped folks, so that when they are doing disaster relief, they can kind of deploy their resources in a strategic manner. Also, whenever they're figuring out afterwards what could be the potential damage, and so it's reporting those kinds of things, that's using some census data. So that's kind of a civic use of our data, a public service use of our data. This is a private retail example. Target and a number of other small businesses that are also in retail are using our data to estimate what kind of, or kind of figure out what kind of goods they should be selling, or what particular markets are interesting for the goods that they sell. So Target, they're like a big box retailer. I know this is not so sexy, but these are the examples that we have. So the big box retailers, what's nice about them, they go anywhere where there's a large population, but their product portfolio differs between places, and the way they determine that portfolio mix, for example, like if they're in DC versus in the suburbs, they look at the demographics, they look at the density, and they figure, okay, so in this video, they basically talk about how in the city you have urban lifestyles, they have smaller spaces, you have more interest in folding furniture, for example, and those kinds of things. Figuring out like what's the demographics, what's the density, what are the kind of socioeconomic characteristics of these places, and figuring out what the optimal product mix is for these places. Reverse engineer that. You can think I want to do a coffee shop. I have this product that I'm interested in doing. I want to know where is the market prime for this. So you can imagine doing, not only using just census data, but one of the big opportunities is matching this up with other publicly available data, for example, through APIs like Yelp or Google or Foursquare or something, figuring out what are some existing businesses, potentially mapping those together and figuring out what the competitive landscape looks like for your particular industry. It's just something to think about. Another use case, this lady tries to figure out where they should be allocating resources to accommodate people with disabilities. So we have a variety of different accessibility types of data sets available, both in terms of like the building's accessibilities as well as like people with disabilities. Homeowners, renters, all kinds of people. One of our most powerful data sets, or I should say the highest level of geographic granularity or geographic resolution, is the American Community Survey. And that kind of data can be used to estimate where you should be building, where there's speculative opportunity, where things are growing, where they're shrinking, where things are receding, and so on. So this guy from the National Association of Home Builders uses our data to figure out where they what the differences in marketplaces between Nebraska and South Florida. These are very the differences between these two types of environments are very different, and they consult with their constituents in different ways. They consult their constituents in different ways based on that. But I think there's no better way to kind of crystallize the value of our data, and Sean agreed as well, is we actually have somebody here in person, and lucky enough we do. Jeremy, where are you? Jeremy, I just saw. Yes. So Jeremy Carbaugh from the Sunlight, he's going to tell you a little bit about his organization and what he does there, and really be thinking about how and give us some food for thought as how some people are actually taking this stuff and putting it into action.
Hi, so I'm Jeremy Carbaugh. I work for the Sunlight Foundation. We're a nonpartisan nonprofit here in DC that works to increase government transparency through technology. So late last year, we received a grant from the Knight Foundation to do...
Can you use the mic, please?
Oh, yes.
Oh, the mic is not on?
Oh, okay. I'll talk louder then. So we got a grant from the Knight Foundation to try to build a series of apps that shows how government data can be made useful in the average person's life. So our first app had to do with health data. Our second app had economic data. And they both did okay, but they weren't super great. They're basically just like lists of data. So we went to IDEO, which is a big design firm, and did a lot of user research with them to find out what it is that people actually want from government data. And one of the things that we heard a lot was they want to know what's around them. And they don't want to look at lists of data either. They want to find interesting ways to see this information. So we got to work on an app that we called Zeitgeist. And of course, since Census deals in the information of things around you, they were the perfect data source for us to go to. So I'm going to show the app here. This is available for both iPhone and Android, so if everyone would like to download it, that would be good. There we go. So the goal of the app was basically for the location that you're in right now, what are some cool ways that we can find to show interesting things about your location? So we can zoom in, pick an area here, and we have yet to do a build for iOS 7, so there's a few small little issues here. We can drop a pin, and it'll update our location. We take your point, we look at all the census tiger line shape files to find the locations that you're in, and then query a bunch of data sources, census primarily, to present this information. So we have like the median age of the area around you, age distribution, lots of just like neat infographic style presentation of the information. Census is the primary data source for this screen here. Very expensive place to live right here. Census also provides a lot of this information too. So this was one of the things that surprised us when we started working with census data, is just the breadth of information that they have. So all the commuter information comes from them as well. We talked to them after the fact of some additional things we can do, and one of the best suggestions that I'd like to have in the future is information about how homes are heated. It's actually one of the things that's tracked as well. So we also wanted to pull in other data sources too. So we have Yelp reviews of popular places around. Information about the environment comes from both NOAA and from Dark Sky. And the screen also pulls from EPA. So if you're within a mile of a Superfund site or some other place you don't want to be, there's this black sludge that comes down from the top and tells you. And you can click that and see information about the Superfund site around you.
Have you gone and tried?
What's that?
Have you gone and tried?
We've moved the pin to a location to test, but I've never actually stood. And finally, we have some history. History was actually one of the hardest ones to find data for. But
$1 million for a 74-year-old house?
Oh no, that's there's 1,700 units, housing units within this area.
No, earlier you showed the
Oh yeah,
the median household price.
Yeah.
was $1 million.
That doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
But the houses are 75 years old.
That doesn't surprise me. That's actually kind of lower than I thought it would be.
I want something new for that.
So anyway, when we started this project, I had heard horror stories about census bulk data and how just difficult it was to work with. But 2 days into it, we heard about the Census API that was announced. So yeah, it was fantastic. So we hooked up the Census API into our backend. Within 2 hours, we were pulling in data, and that 2 hours also included making a reusable Python wrapper for their API, which is available, Python Sunlight. If anyone writes in Python, it's a nice wrapper for their API. So it was great to get their data in, easy to start using. I have nothing but great things to say about the Census.
You're too kind.
Yeah, so that's it.
Thank you. So we're going to invite the rest of our folks back up here. Not really. I mean, there are resources on there, but we can share those out with them afterwards, right? Okay, so we're going to basically do a little 2-minute introduction for each of us. And like as Sean said before, we're really here for this reverse pitch. So I hope you guys are prepared because you're the real main course. Which means that if you guys are on your phones, as Sean said, this is going to suck. So what we're going to do is we're going to introduce ourselves. We'll give you 10 minutes to think as we introduce ourselves. What we do in our expertise, and I'll just give it away, I'm not the expert. I'm the non-expert of our 5. We're going to give you that time to kind of think about what kind of questions you can ask us. We're going to talk about what we do in a way that sort of frames like what kind of questions you can ask us. I want you to think about some of the curiosities. It doesn't have to be anything specific. If you have a problem in your mind that you're interested in solving at a general level, at a specific level, toss anything up at us. We're willing to entertain any kind of idea. That's what we're here to do. So with that said, we'll just go down the line.
I'm Mike Ratcliffe. I'm a geographer by training. I've worked in both the geography and the population divisions at Census Bureau, so I've spent a lot of my over 20 years there working with demographers, geographers, statisticians. I'm a census data user because the geographic areas that we define, that I'm in charge of, we use census data to define those areas. So in carrying out my work, I've had to be right in the data sets, just like all of you, or many of you probably have been. Worked with the economic folks as well to do the economic geography for the economic census. And so geographic concepts, geographic products, maps, that's mainly my expertise.
Right. And just to kind of tap back in that, Mike is the geography guru with National Geographic, Oxford, and with his colleague over here. Geography is his sort of special sauce. He also is, but geography also is the common thread that binds all of our data. So anything that you do with census data is going to touch geography. So that should be a part of your mind. Anything location-based, that should be something within the frame that you're thinking about. That's really where all our data touch and overlap with that. I'm at Census Bureau in the Center for New Media. My job is basically to do things like this, to engage and kind of stimulate and find out new ways and finding people with new ideas how they're going to leverage our data. We've had this API out, as Jeremy mentioned, for about a year. So it's very new, and we're trying all kinds of things, and we're hoping to get sort of like people's creative juices flowing. And all of us are going to make our contact information available, and we'll send that out ex post. But we're here to sort of answer any question, both in this currently today, but also following up with those resources. And feel free to contact any of us with any specific questions. General questions can be directed to me.
Yeah, real quick, I just want to reiterate, I've been working with Logan. It's been fantastic, incredibly helpful. Like, all of my stereotypes about government are kind of shattered. So please, take them up on the offer. When we give out the contact information,
Thank you, Sean.
I'm Eric Newberger. I'm with the Communications Director at the Census Bureau. And the first thing I have to ask, how many of you have downloaded the Census Bureau Economies app?
America's Economy.
America's Economy. 1. This is a fantastic opportunity. You have permission to use your phone if you are going online to take the America's Economy app.
Actually, it's busted right now.
I
I know, but
just pulled it up.
They just updated it today, and that update is broken. I know it's like a horrible day. Perfect opportunity to talk about. I just found out about it today. I'm sorry, really, but this is a good app. I mean, people love it.
I looked at it. It was
The
nice.
president has it on his phone. I mean, lots of
Sean,
people.
revising your opinion?
Yeah.
No, full disclosure here, you know, we hold nothing back.
There's also another mobile app coming out.
I was going to have them download it. Anyway,
You can download it. It just may not work.
I'm the communications director. Download the America's Economy app when you can. If you're interested, you know, all of the economic indicators, as we release them, they go up on the app. So you'll know right when Wall Street knows. Anyway, also the president, because it's on his phone. The communications directorate, I've been there for 4 years, but prior to, I've been with the Census Bureau for a decade and a half. Prior to the communications directorate stint, I was in the population division. I was in the household economic statistics area, which is now called Seaside. I was in the administrative records research area for a while. I know a lot of the data sets that we have on the demographic side. I know a few of them on the econ side, not as many. I can answer your questions about that. But the primary job I've had for the last 2 years, really, has been as the head cheerleader and at the Census Bureau for data visualization. And it has been my endeavor to affect change in the organization to increase the ratio of graphics to text in our publications, both online and on print, to open up our data sets and indeed our statistics to a broader public, a public that may not use data sets and know how to use computers like you guys do. So my goal in life is to open data sets at the Census Bureau to a broader public. So I want you guys and gals, everybody here, should go home tonight, hook up with the API or something else, and come up with apps which make our data available to people who do not use spreadsheets. If you don't know how to use a spreadsheet, you can't get to the 370 billion cells that are within the American Fact Finder, for example. You're unlikely to be able to use that well if you don't know how to use a spreadsheet. But that data is the history and numbers of every neighborhood in this country, going back to 1990 right now, and then we have historical stuff which we hope to put up later. So I would like to expose that to the American public, and I want your help. So please help us. Thank you.
Please help us.
And I'm Tim Gilbert. I work at the Census Bureau on the American Community Survey specifically, and it was interesting to hear what federal data users or people want out of their federal data sets is to know what's around them, because that's exactly what the American Community Survey provides. It gives you a screenshot or a snapshot of exactly what's around you in your neighborhood. It goes all the way down, as Mike can comment a little more detail on, all the way down to the block group level in some instances. It's really geared for creating pictures of the neighborhood, and a primary use for all of our data is for people in their own neighborhoods to use this to better their neighborhoods, to get things that they want, or to for businesses to come in that they might want to have in their neighborhood. So I'm really excited to hear what y'all have plans for and ideas for, because that's what I'm here, is to try and help you guys out and try to realize those.
Hi, I'm Bill Rankin. I'm the tech guy here. I've been at the Census Bureau for 30 years, and I have worked with 90% of our data. So if you have a question about data, if these guys don't know who are the experts, I probably have used it or had to work with it at some point in time. I guess I'm the one who is the API guy. My group was the one that developed the Open Data Census API, and I encourage you to please use it. We have about, I think we're over 3,000 developers, and we hit over 250,000 hits, $250 million hits this past month. So hopefully you'll be able to utilize our stuff.
And Jeremy has introduced himself, but yeah, Jeremy is the man here. And really, if you have, would you be willing to answer questions of people? Sure. And also, would you be willing to share your contact information?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, fantastic. So with that, we want to have ideas here. We want to generate. We had conversations with some people around the audience. But yeah, go ahead, get it back.
I'll tell you what I've done.
And make sure you speak up as well. Project.
I have two frameworks that are available that are in production at the moment. One is for accessing Federal Reserve economic data. The other one is for working with World Bank data. So I've got two questions here. Could I benefit, or could people in general benefit from combining any of that data with the data that the census offers? Because I'm coming strictly from an engineering point of view. I don't actually analyze the data personally. So I've created the frameworks for accessing and working with the data.
So you have Federal Reserve data and World Bank data.
Yeah, there's a last one, which is the USA spending,
Okay.
but that's not production ready yet.
And what do you apply these data to? What kind of problems?
It's open source, so people can use it. It's free.
It's just like a wrapper on top of their data.
It is a domain model and a language that you can use to query the data.
Got it.
And those are using RESTful web services, so getting a bit technical here now, I won't stay on it.
Sure.
It's easy to write to that specification.
Got it.
So that's where I'm at right now. The thing is that I'm looking at other things that I could mix with that. And obviously one reason why I came here tonight.
Okay, so to answer your question, would it be useful to combine the data from the Federal Reserve and these other sources with census data? And the answer is yes! But more specifically, because the data that you have may have a number of, there's a great deal of business data that you will have. Business data is terrific, and we live in an economy that is about 2/3 consumer driven. So if you're interested in personal income, if you're interested in the amount of money that people have to spend, if you're interested in whether or not they're employed, if you're interested in where they're living and what kinds of jobs they have and what their educational attainment is in which neighborhood, which is the description of the consumers in this country, that's ACS. So yes, it would probably be handy. And there are probably other things too, but that's the first one that jumps into my mind.
Yeah, one of the other things you want to look at is what geography. Question coming next. So you'll find with from data from like Federal Reserve and Bureau of Economic Analysis and other agencies. World Bank is mostly national data. But at least in the federal government, a lot of the economic agencies, the lowest level of geography is the county. And even in our economic census, you get rich data at the county level, and then below that maybe the place or a township, but yeah, but nothing below that. So you want to look at the geography, and I would, if you're not into looking at the geography, I would just say grab whatever they have at all the different levels of geography, create the opportunity for people to mix however they can. What we found in working with the savvier data users will be able to take data at whatever level of geography it's available at, and then figure out how to either parse it to lower geographies or aggregate it to a higher common level.
Yeah. Actually, I'd like to build on that because yes, I think a big way. Important in mashing up data, and if that's your objective. If your objective is just to release data and make it in a more accessible way through a RESTful API, for example, of course, do that for all the data sets that you can do that for. But if your objective is to create an interface so that people can easily mash up data, then geography is going to be key, right? So if you have data at one level of geography, for example, county, but really what's the use case for somebody who wants some like a local entrepreneur or something? It might not be.
You use it as a prediction model.
Right.
You use a county as a standard for the local environment, and then you see whether or not you can predict what the county level is based on these other related. You see if
he's talking to me.
I'm talking to him. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
You use count. You all know this. I was about to tell you some things that you know. I'm sorry. But you can use you use the county level. You take the smaller data that you believe is related to the variable that you have on the county level, and you see whether or not your model is good by seeing whether or not the small areas can predict what that big area is. And if you have a good prediction model,
between
if you have a good prediction model, then you can use the layers on top of one another to judge the environment in which whatever is the business or the whatever is going to be started.
But I think at the county level, and I'll get to your question real quick, but I think at the county level you have to understand the users of this data at various levels of geography. When it comes to like someone who's like a local entrepreneur, they're probably going to want hyperlocal available data. The World Bank is like nations and international data, right? So that's like basically information that's either for journalists or for planners, like big like federal planners. And so like, county level might be like local, like more local, but still kind of planning, a little more organization. You can use it and extrapolate from that, like trends based on change and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, if you want to match data up, it's definitely a matter of how granular geography. What's the use case for that? Go ahead.
Kind of on the same topic, do you publish a great big crosswalk for the geographies across time and how they fit together, or?
No, we actually haven't, but that's something that we've talked about. Yeah.
Lots of people have asked for it.
Yeah, lots of people have asked for it. It's on our list of things to do, our huge, big, long list of things to do.
Yeah, Eric, could you repeat
So
the
the question was, have we created a big crosswalk of geographic areas across time? And it's something that we've always wanted to do. It's not always at the top of the list.
Opportunity. So I mean,
but one of the things, if you start delving into the geography and census, what you find is that over time, a lot of one geographic area at one time will be used as the basis for a different type. So for instance, if you go back in like the late 1800s, there's a lot of data by ward, by city ward, for most of the industrial cities in the Northeast and Midwest. Well, when they started creating census tracts in 1910, the city wards became the basis for most of the census tracts in cities like New York and Baltimore. So if you understand that relationship, or if we created a crosswalk that told you that relationship, you'd be able to basically take your tract data and work all the way back into the 1800s, moving from tract into ward, and knowing that it's basically the same kind of thing.
So actually, if you're interested in this problem, there's lots of other people who would love a solution to that problem, because I actually have heard this same problem reiterated over and over again. Jeremy,
but I'll tell you something else, though, that I was working on the Baltimore ecosystem study out of the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, and one of the things that we realized, we were doing 200 years of population change in the Baltimore-Washington region. One of the things, kind of that aha moment, we were trying to map historical data. Knowing how the census tracts and block groups are defined, I knew, because I do that, I knew that they were based on features in the landscape. Well, the boundaries that form, the roads and streams that form the boundaries of tracts and block groups haven't really changed in the Baltimore-Washington area in over 100 years. We were actually able to take the 1990 tracts and then the 2000 tracts and use those as a basis for creating data digital data for 1880 and 1870. And so basically pulling the census data out of the enumeration records that are available, they're on microfilm at the university, had an army of undergraduates mining those data, and we basically mapped population densities in a couple of the stream valleys around Baltimore in 1880 using current census tracts.
So that works for like overlapping geographies.
That was really cool.
But so for example, for example, I did some research on this because a lot of people were asking for this thing, and actually Mike was talking about what we were talking about is what they did, for example, in Japan. It's also been done in Columbia University for a small sample of geographies. Is gridify it, which essentially is break all the geographies down into little micro cells and then like distribute them, and that's kind of an allocation problem. Distribute algorithm or whatever you want to develop, and allocate them into little cells so that they aggregate up into larger blocks and basically overlap the blocks, and then you can. So there's a if you create that, people will come to you, and we'll direct them to you if you create it. I'll tell you. That's what we're here to do, and this is an early community. I mean, we're going to be kind of spotlighting anybody who's doing anything cool that other people are asking for. Okay.
So I have a related question, and maybe that's part of the answer.
Talk louder.
Okay, my question is related. Even neglecting changes over time, seems like people don't agree on what boundaries are right now.
Right.
And even when they think they agree, in the case of shapefiles, they tend not to actually agree. I hate shapefiles, and they're evil. So you commonly have this situation where you're trying to, you have maybe blocks, and then you have neighborhoods, and you want to get statistics at this level, which is not a census level at all, right? So there must be a solution to this problem. Is it the gridifying thing? Like how do we aggregate, especially in the cases where there's fairly serious non-overlap?
Yeah. So one way is like as Logan said. So how do you kind of take how do you So this is the common problem that everybody runs into. How do you take the census geography and then translate it to some other geographies that we don't publish data for? So you can take the approach that Logan mentioned. You kind of break everything down into grids. You come up with some algorithm to distribute your data across the grids, and then you re-aggregate to something that looks like the other geography that you're interested in. Grids are okay, but how many of us kind of think in terms of grids? I mean, unless you're talking about cities, grids. But we were always asked, when are we going to start publishing data by grid? And my kind of flippant answer was always when people know what grid they live in. The world has kind of changed a little bit, so I think it's a little easier to do now. So that's one way to go. One is to kind of overlay your two geographies and then do some sort of parsing based on either area of overlap or some other means. You can get really sophisticated looking at because if you just do an area split, you could, if your say tract overlaps a particular neighborhood and 80% of that neighborhood is within the tract, you can say, okay, I'm going to take 80% of the tract's population. Well, that may not be the true distribution of relationship. So you can go to other ways of looking at street segments, density of streets, density of intersections, whatever you want to do.
To me, I keep hearing these questions about wrangling a little bit of the geographies, the shape files, breaking it down, transforming it back up to a different area or region. I'm just going to throw this out there, speculating, is this a business opportunity?
Absolutely.
Yes,
absolutely.
Like I said, business opportunity.
And you mentioned neighborhood, and neighborhood is the one geography that we probably hear most frequently that people want the Census Bureau to publish data for. They want data by neighborhood. Well,
market research, right there.
Yeah, well, we were having a conversation.
I can testify to that.
We were having a conversation earlier about that. Who knows the definition of Shaw, or the boundary of Shaw, or Adams Morgan?
Yeah.
Columbia Heights, And I can guarantee you that if you go into any of those neighborhoods and ask 10 people who live there at random what the boundary is, you're going to get 10 or maybe 11 or 12 different answers. And so from an organization standpoint, from our standpoint, we're sitting here thinking, oh my God, now take every city in the country that has neighborhoods, every county in the country, and try to figure out, try to find the authoritative source on who has the right boundary for each neighborhood, and then collect all that information, and then hope that all the data users, all of you, will agree with that, and then have to adjudicate that. One of the things that I end up doing after every census with some of the statistical areas we define is spend some time on Capitol Hill explaining where we put the boundaries and why, because the congressman's usually saying, you put the boundary here and now you've cost my constituent $1 million in grant funding because it really should have been over here. And then, if I move it over there, then I cost somebody over here $1 million. So we've punted on the neighborhood issue, but this is a great business opportunity.
So if someone solved this problem, do you think you could direct customers to the solution?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, we could.
No one here do something.
So we have 3,000 developers. All of them probably face the same problem. That's only in 1 year. So we can send all those people to anybody who builds something like that. So these are the kinds of things. Yeah, please.
No, there's a question right
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. How do you recommend aggregating the medians?
Median?
Eric, you want to take that?
Medians
So like
what?
median income.
Aggregating across what?
A median of
So
medians.
like the case where we have a bunch of census tracts or whatever, and we're going to a different level. Do you recommend median of medians, charting across?
How about, this question might be a little bit specific. Maybe we can take that.
No, it's okay. It's
Basically a median of medians.
I know, you'd be doing a median, but you'd be weighting it by population, presumably, or household.
So if you take 3 census tracts, let's say, you've got median income for 3 tracts, you want to aggregate to take those 3 tracts and create one geographic area. Now you want to have the median income for that group of tracts. You're basically computing a median of the median.
Maybe weighted by the population.
But you need to weight it by the population, so it'll be an interpolated median, or a weighted average, if you will. I'd work with a weighted average and call it a day. I think very simply about these things. I really do.
Stand up. When you ask your question, stand up and yowl.
I think very simply about these things. That's what I've got.
So if neighborhoods are the #1 requested, are metropolises the #2?
Think about
well,
them.
Those we kind of
So-
have.
Yeah,
Like, what for DC, how do
so
you define
that's an
for
easy
instance?
answer. That's a very easy answer. The Office of Management and Budget defines metropolitan statistical areas. That's
Okay.
the only geographic area that's a federal statistical standard, and every statistical agency has to use OMB's definition for metro area. So that's nice in that, you know, you can go to Census, Bureau of Labor Statistics, Bureau of Economic Analysis, Economic Research Service, and if you get, from each of those agencies, when you're getting data for the Washington, Arlington, Alexandria metropolitan area, it's the same definition across every single agency.
So that, like, built into that, for instance, is this imaginary line within Loudoun County, Virginia, for instance, where it stops being DC suburbs and starts being rural Virginia.
Actually, metro areas are county-based, so you don't have to worry about the imaginary line running through Loudoun. They're all defined based on counties. So all of Loudoun County, you may not agree with it, but it's a county-based. And it gets back to what I was saying earlier about the economic data. So you've got this geographic unit that's used by every statistical agency. Well, the economic agencies, because most of their data only go to the county level, they need to have a geographic area that stops at that level. So if we define metropolitan areas at a sub-county level, Bureau of Economic Analysis wouldn't be able to publish data.
So in a sense, if you mean imaginary in that it's not like a terrestrial artifact that creates the
Right.
line, yes, it's imaginary. It's a political line,
Yeah.
or an administrative line.
But now urban and rural does split counties, and there is no federal standard. So Census Bureau has one definition of urban and rural. Economic Research Service in the Department of Agriculture had 60 different definitions of rural at one time, depending on the legislation. Every federal agency can decide how they want to define urban and rural at whatever aggregations of geography.
So again, I think if you consider like a use case, and really if you're trying to solve any problem based on geography, you're going to have to think about who's going to be interested in information at this level of geography. At the metropolitan area geography, for example, I played with some kind of app, and I told it what I liked. And I said, I like cold weather, big cities, and people my age. And it picked Columbus, Ohio. Now, that's not what I was looking at. I love Chicago, and I think that's really what I was saying. I love Chicago. Tell me what other things like. It picked Columbus, Ohio. I don't know if you've ever been to Columbus, but it's not like Chicago. So what you end up with is when you end up with these higher level aggregates, you get sort of spread thin data. So it depends on who your user is as to what level of geography. And the reason why people are so interested in neighborhood level geographies is that it's because it's very entrepreneurial, it's very hyper-local, and people want to, like, I want to pull my Yelp data in, I want to mash that up with Census Bureau data to a level of geography, granularity, resolution that makes making my decision as a business person easier, for example. So there's still value in the fact that our geographies are somewhat, well, completely esoteric in many ways, sometimes. There's still value if you mash that up with point data, for example, and you can do like fancy algorithms to allocate, and if somebody was to create this solution, for example, we would direct them that way. But yes, think about the user and think about who would be interested in data at that level.
Hi, my question is about the data, not the unit of analysis, if you will, which is, I mean, we could go on, I know, but for example, 50 years ago, the way that forests were analyzed were acres of lumber. That was an economic measure. And since then, we've added biodiversity or carbon footprint as ways in which we talk about forests. There are similar kind of emerging forms of visibility into data. Either the data doesn't exist or it's known that new data needs to be developed. And an example of this is in economic development. Happiness is a topic that is now capturing the attention. And how do you calculate time poverty? How do you capture loneliness? Things of this sort. How do you go about discerning and aggregating new data types into your data set and what's coming up?
You want me to take that on?
Sorry. Do it? That's a tough one because you're basically, these are kind of somewhat subjective.
Okay, the first thing you need to know, if we are asking a question, there is a legislative need that requires us to ask the question. All right, whatever we're asking, it's because Congress said so. They didn't say you have to ask this exact question, but they said you need to find out this because we're running that. And we need to know how to run that. We need to manage it, so collect something. And that's pretty, and even if it's not, sometimes we do work for the other federal agencies. The congressman told them, and then they came to us. So the first thing is that our collections really are run by whatever's happening in the country as reflected by law, as reflected by regulations, as reflected by what we're trying to accomplish. So that's the first real part of that answer, is really most of our efforts at collecting new data are around new laws or new management of old laws. So like if happiness really does become the measure that all the economists are saying we need to know happiness, I guarantee we'll start measuring it. It'll happen. And the way that'll happen, we've got a whole floor of people that are, we've got psychologists and psychiatrists, or not psychiatrists, I can, but we have psychologists and we have specialists in doing testing for questions and coming up with new questions, and then we field test them, and we go through a number of rounds. Before anything gets on a form, it's been tested 6 ways from Sunday, and cognitive interviews, all kinds of stuff. So there's a whole process about that, but really it usually starts with a legislative need. We don't really collect stuff because we think it's cool.
Well,
now there is stuff that we collect that we think is cool.
I would also say there are things like even in the videos that we didn't get to run, but what Logan was talking about, the idea of measuring like vulnerability of a population. People are doing that with ACS data to plan for disaster relief, and we have other like language isolation. We have all that data, and it's really, I think I see it more of an index of multiple different data that can be aggregated together to get that kind of idea of happiness or vulnerability.
I would
or
actually
something.
agree with that. So you can make an inference, for example, from like child well-being. We do measure that with our SIP data.
Yeah.
We have child well-being data that are very, it's sort of like interview data. And something that's really kind of a hot topic these days, and if you do something around this, you'll probably get exposure on, because the journalists are really interested in digging their teeth into this right now, it's inequality. And a lot of what people are, kind of the hypothesis is that inequality creates unhappiness. It creates violence, and there's all these kind of, if you look at correlations between violence and or like homicides and stuff like that, and inequality, there's a really strong correlation. So these are things that you could potentially use our data, which we do have these kinds of basic metrics. You can aggregate them together and extrapolate out something like that.
Yeah, I mean, we've got.
Yeah, there's quite a bit of data in there that you can probably figure out a way to creatively.
We ask just
too much.
We ask a lot of stuff.
Maybe some people think too much.
We ask, what is your if you want to know what is the impact of not having health insurance,
exactly.
Right? You want to know what not having. We have a survey, SIP. That happens. This is what remind. We have the SIP survey in which we ask people, do you have health insurance? Where do you get your health insurance? What is your state of health? Have you been to a doctor? Have you been to a dentist this year? Are you on medicine? And if you were on medicine, is it all year? Is it just, were you on some medicine this year and now you're off? It was an antibiotic, or that's what it is, but temporarily, or none at all. And I can take those data and I can show you that people without health insurance, regardless of their state of health, which we've asked about, are using fewer medical services. They're not going to the dentist, they're not going to the doctor, they're certainly not staying in the hospital. Then those differences, not 100%, but there are these differences and they're there. The indicators are there. You can see the impacts, even if we don't have a direct measure of, we never did ask someone, because you don't have health insurance, did you have to make the following decision?
So we'll go to you and then we'll go to you.
Yeah, I just wondering if you could talk a little bit about, time granularity and what's the collection cycle?
You want to know about our time use survey.
No. How often do we take our how frequently do we
update? We have a time use survey.
So the decennial census is every 10 years. So you go in and look at all the 10 variables or so that are there. That's every 10 years.
We also, and that data is available down to the lowest geographic resolution, the highest geographic resolution. We have that down to the block. So you can get, for the decennial data, you can get really, so it's kind of the sacrifice, I'm sorry.
No, that's
not together. The longer the period, the more the decennial we check every household, right? So we have incredible amount of geographic resolution.
Yeah, it's not so much the interval between the collection as
the
what-
scope.
the scope.
Yeah, the scope
So
of the
there's
collection.
actually these two things that you need to think about: the interval, the time between different collection periods, and then how many households or how many respondents we're actually going to. So you've got the census that's every 10 years and it's going to every single household in the country. Great granularity. The American Community Survey, which I'll let Tim talk about that.
It's kind of a nice transition because it did come off of the decennial census and now collects all the long-form data. We're collecting it more often, so instead of having to wait every 10 years for some of that really detailed social and economic and housing data, you're not just getting the demographic, the basic demographics, but now you're getting it every year. And we release, so we're out in the field collecting every day of every month, pretty much. And then we aggregate that data together for the entire year of data collection and release that data representing that year.
Can you give a sense of like the 1 to 3 and the 5 year and what the geographic resolution is for those?
Right. So when we release 1 year data, that's all geography 65,000 population or more. Then we aggregate 3 years of collected data together to cover a 3-year time span, and that'll cover everything down to about 20,000 population. And then we'll aggregate 5 years of data together, and now we're releasing each one of these 3 data sets every single year because it took us 3 years to build up till we got a 3-year data set, 5 years to build up until we had 5 years. So now we're releasing all of them, and the 5-year data set goes down to, there's no real population threshold for the data products that we release. It's just really down to, for some of our tables, down to the block group for all of them the census tract.
And then you've got economic census data, which is every 5 years, 2 and 7 years. We conduct over 100 surveys, demographic surveys. Some of those are longitudinal, following the same household over a period of time. Some of those are just a different sample every year. But those are typically smaller samples, like the current population survey, which provides some of the unemployment and employment data. It's only like 60,000 some households.
60,000 in most months, but then in March when we do the income supplement, we bulk it up and we include it's the ASEC now, the annual socioeconomic, and it's we've got February, March, April, we collapse it all together so that we get more than 100,000, and that gives us a lot of most of the income inequality figures that you'll see published on come from that survey. That's where our poverty and income report come from every September. So that's a sort of weird one because it's a monthly survey, because the monthly household survey that was created to follow employment, but we have this big supplement to it that's an annual. We've got a lot of annuals.
We have basically, if you want data, want to find out more about it, that just send us an email. Of course, we have crap loads of data. Go ahead.
That's a technical term.
Right. But loads.
So is the data free? Is the data free?
Yes.
Everything's free.
Everything's free.
You've already paid for it.
It's already paid for. Yeah, actually quite expensive. Yeah. So.
The IRS collects our fee. It's here.
And then your follow-up?
The follow-up question would be, is there a requirement for like having a research proposal to
No.
access?
No.
You can get everything.
Hey,
You
right
come to
here's
the
where
website,
you
it's
go.
all there.
That's
Well,
not
there's
true.
an exception.
That's not true.
But there is
One
one
exception.
exception. You can get everything, except you can get a little bit more. Is this what you were going to say?
Yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Please,
You
no,
do it.
I don't know.
Yeah.
No, you have to become like a sworn researcher, and they check your past history for 20 years.
Oh yeah.
Yes,
You
no, that's
you
true.
get micro data.
If you're interested in getting the microdata, if you're interested in getting, it's still largely anonymized, I think. You're not getting names or anything like that, right?
But you're getting individual.
But you get
level.
individual level records
Yeah.
that haven't gone through the process. We have these files called the PUMS files, the public use microsample files, in which we've cleaned them up, so we got rid of all we top coded all the incomes that were above a certain level, because if some guy makes $3 million a year, you know who he is when you see the number, right? So we don't tell you that. And there's a bunch of stuff we do, like for these public use files, for the microdata. But if you have a specific research need that you need to get to microdata that hasn't gone through the PUMS process, you're still not getting names, but if you go through and you end up swearing and going through all kinds of stuff that we go through when we work
But
with
for
data,
example, the reason why
then yeah.
you're still dangerous, kind of, you can't release this to the public is because, let's say, for example, in a rural community and there are 3 people in my square mile. I know what the family composure and the income level, and this farmer over there is making twice as much as me. What's his trick? You know what I mean? So I don't know. That's the reason why we anonymize it. We aggregate it up.
So those data are available in our research data centers. We have these scattered around the country, generally at major universities. And so you pay a fee, you buy a seat in the research data center. You have to submit a proposal, a research proposal, and that gets reviewed at the Bureau to make sure that there's some benefit not only to you but also to us in the research that you do. You get to come in, you get access to the actual response data, the actual individual level records. And then anything that you do gets reviewed before you walk out the door. You can't take that information with you. You can aggregate it up in your analysis, and that all gets reviewed by disclosure statisticians at the Bureau to make sure that you're not going to end up disclosing anything about any individual.
And I'd like to emphasize, none of you want that data.
It's too much.
It's not that it's too, you don't want it. We've got, you don't need the individual record stuff. We have block group level data, we've got count, we've got all this stuff that unless you're really doing a sort of fancy-dancy survey researchy kind of thing, which it's not a business, it's a fancy-dancy survey researchy kind of thing. If you're doing a fancy-dancy survey researchy kind of thing, not a technical term, you want these data, but apart from that, you probably want what we're publishing already in one form or another.
You had another part of that, are you done? Okay, there was a question over here. Yeah, go ahead.
You were mentioning, or a couple of you were mentioning that you have something about 3,000 developers that do something.
We have 3,000 developers in our community.
A little more about that. In the community.
We have 3,000 developers that have keys to our data set, and we have about 800 people on the newsletter. These are data users of our API.
But not to work with the Census Bureau.
Not at the Census Bureau.
No. Okay.
That would be
outside
awesome.
outside development.
That would be awesome. I wouldn't be here if we had 3,000 developers. That's like, sorry, Gary.
I was asking because I thought that almost sounded low because people are very into using APIs when they are available. So do you expect exponential growth or how's it?
Oh, it's a year old. Yes, we do expect it.
I wouldn't say exponential. No.
We're trying to.
It's been linear from what we've seen.
But you could all go home tonight
That's right.
and get a key to the API and start writing apps.
Go ahead.
And we would love for you to do that.
I just said, is the API a replacement for the American Fact Finder if you can use it correctly?
I don't know if we.
No,
Really?
it's not. American Fact Finder is an official data product that we put out, and we will continue to support it for some time.
But you could create something
If
better.
you can create something that will help us have something that can look. The API it's a new technology. American Fact Finder is this big block of data that's available, and it's really about finding tables. You're looking for your table, and how do you find your table that has your data? It's got ACS data and CP. It's got ACS data, and it's got the census results in it, and pop estimates. It's got all this stuff in it, and it's really the biggest single source of data in the Census Bureau realm.
That's right. And actually,
And because it is so big, it is not easy. And the more we can get people who are using a lot of the same data that are on, a lot of the API data is coming from American Fact Finder. If we can get more people using things like Easy Stacks, Quick Facts, if we can get people using some of these other things that are running off of the API, or your stuff that's running off the API, we would be only too happy. And if at such a time you create a tool that allows so much access that American Fact Finder is just superfluous, well, yeah, absolutely, great. Rocco.
As a user of the API, it really is fantastic. We, at Sunlight, not everyone, but most people, rather, instead of using Fact Finder, we use the API now for almost everything. Because if you know the ACS columns that you want and geography, it's one single call and you get tabular data back. So we basically built interfaces for people who we work with that if they want specific information, they run it and they just get a CSV right out of it.
Just Googled it on my phone. Census Bureau API comes right up.
Rock and roll. Yeah, also, yeah, and for those who are not developers, and we're not assuming everybody here is, the AFF is actually really good, especially for like data journalists and stuff. People who are actually looking for low-level data about a specific location, that's actually the tool that you're going to use to find that data. So the AFF is great for people who aren't developers. The API is great for developers. It's actually much better for developers to use the API than AFF, of course. There's like, it's a raw interface. They can control how they want to interact with it. But the AFF is really, it's actually, there's an improvement now. So I don't know if you've looked at it within the past 6 months, but there has been an improvement. But it is really geared towards like civic journalists, you know, community builders, entrepreneurs and such. And if you have any complaints, of course, there's a feedback button right there, and I hope you do feedback, please, because they do listen to that. They do pay attention to that.
I've had when you do American background and have like a few issues. So I'm basically pulling across states, races across each state, and trying to do lower level and then breaking it out by certain factors. I've had some problems like trying to get it into Excel and downloading it just with errors.
You mean it doesn't download it?
Yeah, it just kind of gives me like an overload.
Might be
Was it
you might have too many geographies or too many
Should there be something else that I should
The FTP server.
How about this? You know what? We'll send the slide deck out. Just email me. Email me the query that you're trying to make, and I'll send it to the right people. Make sure that you get it.
Okay.
We have an FTP server for larger.
Yeah, we have batch too.
Yeah.
We can hook you up.
And we've also, from Geography Division, we've also, over the past couple of years, been releasing shapefiles with pre-joined demographic data.
But not for him, because
He doesn't like, well, I think I know where he's looking at. I would agree with shapefiles, but there's a different issue there that maybe we can come back to later on. But what we've done there is we've taken our Tigerline shapefiles for a lot of all of the most common geographies, and then pre-joined, done the data download from the FTP site for you, and joined it to the geographic areas. Yeah, feeds right into ArcGIS. So if you go to the Tiger page and then, just like geography, then Tiger, and go to our Tiger page, and then you'll find Tigerline shapefiles pre-joined with demographic data. And we've got decennial census and ACS data there, 5-year data.
Another thing I'll go ahead and say real quickly is that we're in the process of trying to work with geography APIs here at the Census Bureau as well. So this may be one of those things where you might be able to do things where you're able to create maps using the geography API and be able to get the data using the data API.
Yeah, if you go look at if we go look at Tiger Web, that's what we have. For Tiger Web, that's an online viewer. If you don't want to work with the GIS, but you want to see census geography, you can look at it online. And then we have a web mapping service and REST service.
Yeah, we have a REST service. I have a quick question, and I'll get to your questions. We're the Census Bureau doing a survey, but we're not going to record this. I just want to get a general sense of like the composition of the audience. How many in here are developers? Wonderful, wonderful. How many of you would you call yourself like data scientists, so to speak, like statisticians, people who are fantastic, fantastic. Any kind of data journalists? Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. Civic hackers, people who have used sort of their development skills to do something. I know Harlan has. Come on, raise it high. And Jeremy, of course. All right, cool. That's great. That's great. Well, we have a good mix of people in here. So you had a follow-up?
Yeah, I was wondering, when you were talking about pre-joined demographics to shapefiles. I work at a transportation firm, and people have lots of good experience, but several of us were just positively shocked when we found out that there were, in fact, pre-joined files. Is there any reason?
Shocked in a good way or a bad way?
In a good way. Is there any reason? It seems like that is more beneficial than having them separate. What kind of demand are you finding for these kind of things?
We have demand for both.
Okay.
Variety of different users.
So, I mean, we've got a whole set of data users. Geography Division has a whole set of users that don't even care about statistical data. We have yeah, in fact, I've told some of these guys down here before,
people who like
if the rest of the agency could disappear, we'd still have a customer base for our geospatial data. One of the things that we do is every year we conduct a boundary and annexation survey. So we are the federal government authority on legal boundaries for cities, towns, counties, all the political geography of the country. So we've got a whole set of customers that just want the boundaries for the cities, and they want to see how the city boundaries changed from one year to the next. The roads layer, you know, quite frankly, when you're looking in, well, not so much anymore, but when Navtech and all of those guys started, they started with Tiger as the roads layer and then improved and built from there. So we still have a lot of people in the transportation community and who just want our roads database.
Yeah, I guess I was thinking Polygon.
All but, yeah, well.
Or Census Polygon. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my guess is that if we stopped producing just the plain Tiger line shapefiles, we'd probably have an outcry. Well, yeah, I mean, a lot of planning departments, so the way we define things like block groups and tracts, we're working with local planning departments they actually give us the boundaries they'd like to use. So in many instances, the block group, the census block group, might also be a local planning zone. So, you know, you might have people that they don't want the census data to go along with it. They just want the boundary that's being used at a local level for a variety of other purposes. Yeah. So I think from our standpoint, you know, it's easy to produce both. Yeah. So we might as well just keep releasing both. If I take one away, we're probably going to have an outcry from some part of the public.
So you might begin to see kind of like an emergence here of why we do what we do and the way that we do it. So for example, we survey people at random samples across the geographies, and then we aggregate them up into geographic shapes. But those shapes are defined, basically in order to get anybody to agree on what those shapes might be, you have to engage everybody. So that in itself is a Herculean feat. It's a I don't know if anybody's tried to ever do anything across one agency, just imagine doing it across the country, across a multiple bureaucracy. So getting people to agree on something is in itself a very valuable thing. So it's the task of the entrepreneur to make that generalizable in a way that's sort of non-political, non-administratively focused, not oriented that way, but that's the way that we have to publish them. That's what we're paid to do. So yeah, that's all that we are allowed to do, really, is what we're paid to do.
But to go back to the comment that was made earlier about shapefiles, the one thing that we ensure in all of our shapefiles and all of our geography is that the boundaries and the features are all topologically integrated. What that really means is that, you know, if the county boundary is supposed to be running along a river, then that river and the county boundary are always going to be aligned in all of our geographic products. And Esri's shapefile technology doesn't ensure that. So if you're downloading shapefiles from other sources, even from, say, multiple layers from the same source, there's no guarantee that each of those layers is going to align correctly. But we make sure that we do that because, you know, rivers, roads form a lot of our statistical area boundaries. They form a lot of political boundaries. So we have to ensure that everything is aligned correctly so that all of those lines that should be one on top of the other remain on top of one.
Yeah, exciting. I'll tell you, I'm one of these old-fashioned people that really like publish clean data sets. You guys have this huge pile of stuff, so I think that's wonderful. Probably when I give you a candy store, anybody should go out there and use your guys. You know, compared to World Bank, I mean, you guys are saying it's kind of fun. The question, however, we live in a generation of Facebook, Twitter, people running around with mobile devices, lots of live stuff happening on them. Just for the fun of it, can any of you think of any datum that Census has that you could release as a live feed?
No, but that is exactly the kind of question that we want right now in this kind of environment. So, for example, like most APIs, and there are a lot of government APIs, right, that are like live updated. Now, the only one that we have that's really dynamic is the economic indicators. But that's released mostly at a national level. I think we do something at a regional level. Right, monthly. But our data is valuable for decision making, right? Like in sort of like big decisions, right? I'm buying a home, I'm starting a business, because this is not so as dynamic as some of the data out there. There are other agencies we recommend as well. Other people check out. There's actually a GitHub account. I can share this out, but GSA actually publishes a collection of APIs across the government. Department of Labor, for example, publishes things. There's a lot of data that is available on a more dynamic basis, but you're probably looking, if you're looking for something like that, you're probably going to look at something more local, like a 311 They have 311 APIs and stuff like that. Like that's available in sort of real time. But yeah, but there's still valuable things you can do with real-time data on top of, I shouldn't say real-time data, but with timely data versus sort of like periodically collected. Yeah, right.
We're putting out several. We collect. There are no live feeds. There is no. We're measuring it and you see it now.
You have to go through a process.
Everything, we've got disclosure and we've got huge numbers of people who have to get back to us. 3.5 million a year for the ACS. We've got a lot of data to put together to make things that are reliable.
Well,
that
you're even doing monthly publishing now. So I mean, how good is it?
It's more than monthly. Because we have so many different data sets, we are releasing stuff several times a week. If you go to our website and go to our news release page, we usually have, sometimes we'll come out with a dozen releases in the same day. Small ones, but so we do have a sort of constant, a more or less continuous supply of stuff coming out, but it's on many different subjects.
I will say too, since block groups are the smallest, right? Blocks. Okay, blocks. Yeah. So it's actually a pretty small area that they cover. So some of the tests that we've done, changes of geography are actually quite interesting too. So when you're on your phone, changes of timely stuff or live feeds of stuff are interesting, but it's also interesting to see things that change as you move through the world.
True, very true.
And
it's you changing.
Personally, I think there's lots
the data
of
changes.
neat stuff to do.
And about that,
Very remote locations.
okay, so you're a real estate agent, and you want to sell a house to this nice young couple, and you know they want to have kids. So they're buying a house. You're standing there, you push a button, and the button goes to the Census Bureau data set, and it pulls back all of the information for the school district that you're standing in. Said, hey, did you know that you're in this school district and during the last 2 decades the incomes in this area have gone up and the educational attainment of the parents have gone up? You should really buy this house. Somebody needs to build that app.
We did.
We've got. But is it called the real estate app?
Most of our users are real estate agents.
Yes.
What is it called?
What's that?
What is it called?
No, Zeitgeist.
Oh, shit.
Zeitgeist. That idea, but the idea of having data that are specific to where you're standing, that is as current as it can be, and has a little bit of history behind it, and is wrapped up. Yes, I know it's the Zeitgeist functionality, but wrap it up in a wrapper that says this is for real estate agents trying to sell the
But
kids.
that's so. Could you give us a sense of your user composition and number of users for Zeitgeist?
We've had about like 97,000 downloads, which for a nonprofit that's not doing advertising, we're pretty happy with. It's consistently about 3,000 users every week, I think. But yeah, it was huge in the real estate world.
How do you know? How do you know it was huge in real estate world?
It's been published in lots of real estate magazines. Pretty much all of the contacts we get from users are from real estate agents.
So people are out there who want these data for a specific purpose. If you can identify that purpose and make a wrapper around it, it can be the same functionality that he's giving, but it's got a better wrapper.
Right. Or you can do like,
and there's your business. And by the way, America's Economy App has 111,000 downloads.
Yeah, actually, you know what? The interesting insight here is that Sunlight didn't create this for real estate agents, right? But you just make these data available in a more convenient way, and people will flock to it. It's sort of kind of like there's a pressure for data. There's a sort of an unfulfilled need, a void for data, because it helps people understand their environment, their places, their locations. And Sunlight's doing an amazing job of making that data across a bunch of different data sets, not just the Census Bureau, as they mentioned before, the EPA and the CFPB, I'm sure in the future at some point. Making that data available in a more accessible way, even if you choose a subset of that data, as Zeitgeist did. Even if you choose a subset, but you understand that data set, you just go find some data set that you're particularly interested in, something that you're interested in enough. If you put it out there, somebody else will find interest in it. That's what we found. Because right now it's really hard to use census data. That's why we created the API, because we're not so great at making those user experiences satisfying and easy. And we're making things that are huge and comprehensive, so we basically have to answer everybody's problems, and by doing so, we make it really hard to answer anybody's problems. You know what I mean? So you guys can fulfill certain niches and expose little segments of these data in a way that's more accessible and therefore more useful.
Can you do one more question?
Yeah, sure. Sure. Go ahead.
Okay, so I have to apologize because I actually do work for the Census Bureau, but I'm here undercover because I
You get the last question.
in the evening in the dark. But I worked on a very interesting problem when it came to work as a Fed, and I took the CPS and current population survey over 12 different years and matched it to state death records and did a longitudinal mortality survey.
Okay.
And so I don't mean to be a troublemaker. Stop, Rankin, you know that I'm not always a troublemaker. But there is so much to be said for just longitudinal analysis.
Could you explain what that means?
Oh, over time. What changes, how things changed over time. So I thought your question was really interesting. Because now we count, I'm going to miss it, like Native Americans and Pacific Islanders, and we didn't count them before, right? Or AIANs, Alaskan and Aleutians, right? And so, but before they were all like, God forbid, like yellow, right? And so we've changed over time and we've had to disaggregate them. So that's not necessarily geography, but those are things that people really care passionately about. And I just saw someone give a presentation at the Census Bureau that in 1880, 65% of Arizona was for people of Mexican birth, and things like that. So those ignite passions regardless of where you live and across Thanksgiving tables all the time. So, and one last thing, when people create school districts and boundaries, they do it for reasons that your legislators want. And of course I know why we do our job, because to apportion. But then people move there for the good schools, and then people don't have good schools, and then it gets unequal again, and then it changes. But that's a very interesting problem. And city journalists care about that. And that's micro analysis of changes over time. So I really think shifts of time are great business problems, which, no offense, haven't been sufficiently addressed tonight.
Could have talked about it earlier.
Need to be spoken to about over beer.
Yeah, I agree.
So let me this is all great stuff. I mean, so we had a question early on about mapping the crosswalk and geography over time. You can do the same thing with race categories or ethnic categories as those have changed.
Or industries,
or
occupations.
So just to say real quickly, if you're interested, so this kind of touched on some historical data. There's a joke around the Census Bureau that history ended with the last census. The Minnesota Population Center, though, has put together a phenomenal amount of historical census data in their integrated public use microdata samples. So they've actually gone back into the census records and pulled out samples of microdata from those enumeration forms. So those are on the Minnesota Population Center. And then they've created the National Historical GIS, Geographic Information System, which has county boundaries going back to 1790 for each census. So you can take those data from the IPMs and then map it to the actual boundaries of the counties or the states going back. They've also done that for tracts in the 13 cities that were tracted in 1910. So you can do longitudinal analysis of demographic data in the tracts in New York City from 1910 to 2010 and beyond 2010 now. So that's all off the Minnesota Population Center. Great example of researchers at the academic level who had a need that we weren't fulfilling, that we didn't see a need to go spend resources on, but they could go do it, and they've done a phenomenal job. We've had staff that go back and forth between there. It's the sort of thing where we look at what they're doing, And if we could do it ourselves, we would do it just the way they did. So there's that. Yeah, you've really made a pitch for diving in and understanding how the data and the categorizations and the questions themselves have changed over time. If you look at some of the historical maps, you'll notice that Oklahoma often doesn't have any data in it because, like you said, we didn't count Indians that weren't living amongst the general population in the 1800s. It's not that nobody lived in Oklahoma or Indian Territory, they just weren't counted in the census. And it's a policy decision that changed.
And we still do call them American Indian, not Native American. I think
Yeah.
it's something we do. Anyway, so.
First of all, round of applause. There's a lot of data sets mentioned, there are a lot of links, there's a lot of contact information. We will do our best to push that out to everyone here. We'll probably put it out on the Data Community DC website so that everything's there for time tomorrow until we run out of money.
Keep the conversation going on meetup.com as well because the list service there.
And really importantly, obviously there will be milling about in this room for the next 10 minutes or so. You can run up and ask questions. But then also we're going to go to the Elephant and Castle, which is around the corner, very close. And we're going to have beers. So keep this name tag on and you get happy hour pricing, which is awesome. And is anyone coming out with us tonight?
I'll come with you.
Okay. So you can ask more questions over alcohol. So again, thank you.